Your baby's mind is growing even before they arrive. The more you talk and sing and play, the more their mind will thrive. You gotta talk with your baby, play with your baby, read to your baby, make out you're a lion. Talk with your baby, play with your baby, read to your baby. Your words will grow their mind.
Hello and welcome to the Words Grow Minds Parent Podcast. We'll bring you the experts who can decode what's happening in your baby's brain and give practical tips on how to help them thrive.
And we promise to do this without adding to the ever-increasing parental load.
I'm Kate. I'm a mum of two and a passionate believer in the importance of the early years.
And I'm Amelia. I'm mum to Grace, who's 5, and Ted, who is 1. And I've just noticed, Kate, that I have some peanut butter on my jumper today, probably from little sticky hands. Not sure. Could be my own, but it's only up from here, right?
Ted. We're blaming Ted.
We're blaming Ted. Only up from here, Kate. What are we talking about today?
Well, today we're going right back to basics. We are talking about talk. So by now, hopefully everyone has our Words Grow Minds theme song burnt into their brain in a good way. And you'll recognise that our very first call in the song is to talk to your baby. The reason why, and we're going to get into it with our guest, is that the latest science shows that babies start the process of language recognition within just hours of being born, and actually that it's the way that we talk to them that has a really big influence on the child's development.
It's so fascinating. And Kate, this is something I'm seeing, in real time at home at the moment. And you'll be proud of this because we had a new word from Ted over the weekend and it was football. So
on your Ted.
Yes. But the cool thing is that today we've got a fantastic guest who'll teach us how to best support our baby, learn to talk, and when we might need to seek some support. Helen Smith has more than 2 decades experience as a speech pathologist. She currently works for Children's Health Queensland, developing strategies to improve communication outcomes for all children, but particularly our most vulnerable. She's published research around creating supportive environments for language development and sharing universal messages with families to promote speech and language development too. And she is a parent of 4 children herself. We'd love to welcome you, Helen.
Helen Smith, thank you so much for being a part of the Words Grow Minds Parent Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so I want to start by asking you the basics. How do we best support our children's early language development and speech and communication? And how does it impact on their lifelong learning?
Okay, that's a really big question. In terms of how we best support it, I guess if we break it down really simply, it comes back to the key messages that you're promoting through Words Grow Minds. It's talk, play, read, and sing. And out of those, I guess one of the things that's really important and that comes up again and again is the importance of those serve and return interactions and repeating those over and over again. That's how our children learn to communicate. So we know, as you said, Kate, that children or babies are developing their communication skills even from before birth. They're recognising their mother's voice before birth and can start to distinguish speech sounds from other background noise. And from the moment they're born, babies are communicating with us. So they're starting to give us eye contact and look at us and send us messages. And it's how we respond to those messages, the serves that they give us, and how we respond that builds that communication over time. And doing that again and again and again and repeating that is how children learn to communicate with us and how we establish those really positive relationships that form the basis for communication. We all use the skills to communicate across our lifetime. All of us do that. So we need communication skills to send messages to the people around us and have our needs met. We need those skills to build relationships, make friendships. We need them to participate at school and to even things like employment and things you enjoy outside of work in your own time. We use those skills across a lifetime.
I think a lot of parents might think, well, this seems a bit silly to talk to my newborn who's asleep half the time. But is it just as important from day one?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Amelia. I think it's really easy in the early days with a baby to focus on things like sleep and feeding, and I absolutely understand that. And in those early months, we're also looking for the really obvious things. And some of that is communication, it's smiling and eye contact. But sometimes we get focused on some of the physical development where children are rolling and crawling and learning to walk, and all of that's really important too. But what gets missed sometimes is that, yes, it is really important to communicate with babies from birth. And it's not silly to be talking to a newborn baby and to be reading books to babies and doing those things right from birth, because they are starting to learn language from the moment they're born. So we need to expose them to more and more of those serve and return interactions. So initially, babies will start to cry and make eye contact and smile in the early days. And then the more that we respond to those interactions, that gives our baby feedback that we want them to do those things again, and that's enjoyable and positive. So then they will start to babble and start to understand words. And slowly that babble will change, the sounds will change, and it will sound more like words. And then they start to associate that with what those words mean and eventually start putting them together. But they will only do that when they're getting that serve and return interaction with loved caregivers in really safe, secure environments.
Does it matter how we talk to our baby? Like, baby talk, goo goo gaga, do we have to be making...
Or am I just doing adult conversation? Here,
Yeah.
I've just looked up this recipe on Google,
Give them the latest on global affairs and geopolitics. Does it matter?
I think any language that you're using with your baby, all talk is positive, and the more of it, the better.
That's reassuring, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I think there are times, though, where we want it to be appropriate. So reading books that are appropriate for the level that they're at and responding to those serve and return. So as babies get a little bit older and you notice that they're looking at something, or they might pick up something or grab something, when you respond by giving that a word and telling them what that is or what they're looking at, that's how they learn to associate words and meaning. So it is important to notice what they're paying attention to and responding to that. But all talk at the end of the day, if you're talking and interacting with your baby, that's a good thing.
Are there certain milestones in terms of speech for, kids in the early years that you follow, or what do you think we look for?
There absolutely are milestones. I guess the caveat I would put around that at the beginning is that all children develop really differently. And I think all of us that have more than one child knows that the way that one child develops may not be exactly the same as another child. So pay attention to what your child's doing. And there are heaps of guides. You can look online at things like Speech Pathology Australia that will show you some of those milestones. The big things to look for, I guess, are around 3 months, babies start to communicate by cooing or smiling or laughing, and you see that they can recognise your voice and they might turn their head to look at you. By about 6 months, they're starting to babble and play with different sounds. And then by 9 months, you can see they start to understand some really simple phrases like bye-bye daddy, and they might start to wave or point. And all that time, they're building up their understanding of words as well, even if they're not using them. So then somewhere between about 12 to 18 months, we look for children to start using their first words, like you're talking about, Amelia, with your son. So we start to see those first words emerge, and it's usually naming people or things around them or things that they're really interested in. And then by 18 months, they're understanding short phrases or a couple of words. By 2 years, we're looking for children to be putting 2 words together, and it grows from there. There's a big language explosion around that age of 2 years where we see they start to use lots and lots of different words and are putting them together more.
Can I just explore that a little bit further? And I guess just by way of background, so I didn't talk until I was almost 3.
Really? That's
Yeah.
actually quite hard to believe.
It's shocking, isn't it? And obviously my parents were concerned and they were taking me to a whole lot of specialists. There was a whole lot of tests done. this bit may not surprise you. It turns out I was just really bossy from an early age. So I'd point at things and my brother would go and get them, and I never actually needed to talk. But that's one end of the spectrum. I mean, you just talked about children develop at different stages, different times. So my other experience was one of my children, when he was 4, his preschool teacher said, I think he needs to see a speech pathologist. And I was like, oh, yeah, whatever. Like, I didn't talk properly till late, it's all fine. Maybe he's got a bit of a delay. And he was actually diagnosed as having a severe speech disorder. He was replacing sounds with completely different sounds and had to go through quite intensive speech pathology. So I guess my question is, when do we know it's okay, they're just developing at different stages in their own time? And when do we go, intervention is actually really required? And what do we look out for? Because I think that's a really hard thing for parents.
That's a really good question, and it brings up a couple of things, I guess. One of them that makes me think about, Kate, is the importance of the environment for stimulating language development and noticing what's going on. So it's not uncommon for some children, especially in families where there's lots of children, for some children to get their needs met without having to use a lot of words. So that's where we can, if we're really tuned in and know what we're looking for, we can provide more opportunities for children to practice using words and set up situations where we're expecting them to use words. So even really simple things like singing a nursery rhyme that they know really well, and then pausing and waiting for a key word and seeing if they might jump in and start using that word for us. So the importance of setting up a really language-rich environment and lots of opportunities for kids to practice language is really important. And the other thing that makes me think about is listening to the other people around you as well who interact with children a lot. I think that parents are always the expert about their own child, and you need to trust your gut instinct. But I think there's also a lot of benefit to listening to other people, like people who work in early childhood education and care, who have contact with lots of children and families and can give you some advice and some pointers as well. I guess in terms of things to look out for, though, and signs that you might want to see a speech pathologist, if your baby doesn't seem to be listening to you or responding to you when you're communicating with them, and if your baby isn't using a range of different words by about 18 months, also if your toddler seems really frustrated and struggling to be understood and struggling to get their message across, if your toddler has trouble understanding what you say, and if your child doesn't want to engage in really simple back and forth games, that can be another indicator. Or if you're worried about the quality of their voice, if their voice sounds really different and husky, or if they might be stuttering and repeating words. I think it is tricky to know, even as speech pathologists, there are lots of children who their development just follows a different path. And lots of children will learn to communicate regardless of what is happening around them. But it's difficult to know at an early age who are the children that are going to need intervention from a speech pathologist and who will catch up and progress in their own time. So always, if you're concerned, have a chat to your GP, have a chat to your child health nurse, people at childcare, and then consider referring to a speech pathologist.
More broadly, Helen, can you explain to people listening what a speech pathologist does and why they might want to see a speechie?
Yeah. So speech pathologists specialise in supporting people of all ages with either communication problems or feeding or swallowing difficulties. So particularly for children, that involves supporting children around their speech development, so how they actually produce certain sounds and put them together in words. And it also involves their language skills. So their receptive language, which is understanding words and knowing what someone says to you and understanding what that means. And then expressive language, which is being able to use words yourself and put them together and eventually into sentences and to get your meaning across.
See, in my experience, speech pathologists are basically magicians because we knew that it was all through play. It was, there was a science behind what they were doing, but from the child's point of view, it was getting attention, getting to play, having fun games. I just thought it was a remarkable experience for me to get to see the science of what speech pathologists do in such a gentle, friendly, helpful way. But there are many parents who will say, I think my child needs to see a speech pathologist, but there is a very, very long waiting list. And, that can add to the guilt and the worry of those parents. Do you have advice for things that parents can be doing at home with their children to help perhaps as they wait to see a professional?
Yeah, absolutely. It is a really difficult time and waiting lists are long. I think accessing what resources you can online, so things like Words Grow Minds. Here in Queensland, we have First Five Forever, which are the resources produced through our State Library of Queensland. And there's a wealth of information there that you can look at. There's also New South Wales Government have produced While You're Waiting resources for speech pathology, wow. And you can look those up online and find information there. And then continuing to provide your child with lots of opportunities to practice using their language skills. So if it's possible for you to make it to playgroups or to make it to local library sessions where they get a chance to use those skills, that's really important as well.
When we're talking about giving children a chance to develop, what is the youngest that it would be the norm to be referred to a speech pathologist?
I guess it could be from any age, partly because speech pathologists are also involved in supporting feeding and swallowing development. So some children could be referred as babies because of concerns around their feeding and swallowing initially. I guess it's more common around maybe 12 to 18 months where you're starting to see language used, that children are referred. But it also depends if children are identified with a hearing problem or another medical condition. It really can be at any age.
If I had a child with a feeding or a baby with a feeding difficulty, does that automatically connect to they might have problems with speech later on?
Not automatically, no. So I guess you would address the feeding problem initially. Yes, sometimes those things can have an impact, but no, not necessarily.
So Helen, obviously we just talked about, whether or not feeding difficulties lend itself into speech problems later on. What about dummies?
The problem and the concerns we have around dummies is that similar to screen time in some ways, it reduces the opportunities that our children have for practicing language and interacting with us. They're literally not able to use their language and talk if they've got a dummy in their mouth for a lot of their day. So we would encourage that dummies are used for sleep and for sleep only. And especially as they get older, we don't want to see children around the age of 2 and 3 who are just using them during the day, because that takes away the opportunities that we have for them to use and practice their speech and language skills.
How's it going out the window?
So do you see a link between children who have used dummies for longer and speech problems in early childhood?
I'm not sure that I've read any direct research linking it that closely, but when we look at the environmental factors that set children up for success around their communication development, then yes, the more opportunities they have to practice. If they're spending hours and hours a day with a dummy in their mouth, they don't have that same opportunity, and that can create concerns with language development.
So Amelia and I were talking earlier today about the fact that it's actually cute when your kids are little and they mispronounce words or they have trouble with certain sounds.
They do the F sound instead of it's cute.
It was not fun when trucks drove past with my children, but embarrassing. But it is, there's something nice about childhood that they're learning how to speak. They get it wrong sometimes. Is that okay? Is it okay? Where is the line between what is normal learning to pronounce different sounds and different words And when it is, oh, we need an expert, a professional to come in here and teach them to do it better.
Yeah. So that is really normal that children use different sounds. And if you're, I guess for parents, if you're worried about particular sounds that your child can't produce, I'd look at something like the Speech Pathology Australia website, and it will actually show you what are the different sounds that we're expecting children to produce by different ages. We would ideally say that what you want to do is repeat back to the child the correct pronunciation of those words so that they're hearing the accurate and correct model. But the positive thing about that is that if you're actually paying attention to the words that your child's using and you're engaging with them and responding to it, and you're enjoying that interaction and it's fun, then that's a really positive thing too.
Okay, thank you, Helen. We have got some really useful things here for parents who might actually be having those questions. We are going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to ask you, Helen Smith here, talking about speech pathology, on some of the practical things parents can do at home. We'll be back in a minute.
Your baby's mind is growing even before they arrive. The more you talk and sing and play, the more their mind will thrive.
Every time you interact with your child, you're helping grow their mind. For more information, visit wordsgrowminds.org.au.
Okay, well, welcome back. And now let's have a chat about children's communication development and how we can all help guide that.
Yeah. So anything that involves a positive interaction that's a back and forth extended interaction is really great, whatever that looks like across your day. I guess if I break it down, the foundation first is having a really positive, secure, healthy relationship between either yourself and the child or whoever it is that's interacting with them, whether it's someone at childcare or another family member. And that's really important because we all know that children learn best, and all of us learn best, when we feel safe and secure and loved and comfortable. So that's really the baseline for a good interaction. Then after that, it's about getting face-to-face with your child. So that's really important so that you can see what they're interested in and what they're paying attention to. And they can also see your face and they can see the expressions that you're making. They can see how your mouth is moving and all the different non-verbal communication that you're sending them. That's important because if you're talking to a child about the garbage truck that's going past, but they're actually looking at the bird in the tree, we're really not matching that up very well and giving them the right language for that situation. So eye contact and being face-to-face is really important. And sometimes that's getting down on the floor with a baby and lying beside them so you can really see their face and get close and make it a lovely, positive interaction for them. After that, it's about watching, stopping and waiting and watching to see what it is your child's interested in and giving them the chance to start that interaction. So they might point at something, they might look at something, they mightn't be using words yet, it might be all non-verbal. Or then when they get older, they might actually grab something or take a turn or give you a word. And then it's about how you respond to that. So you let them know that you've heard their message and you give them language to go with it. So if your child looks at a ball, you tell them it's a ball, it's a big ball, and you tell them what colour it is. And it depends on how old your child is as to what that looks like. So if they're using single words, you try to give them just a little bit more language to boost them to the next stage. So you tell them the colour of the ball, the size of the ball, that it makes a noise, something like that. And then as children get older and are starting to use a couple of words together, and they might say, "Mummy, car, go." You could say, "Yes, the car's going to go, and that's a red car," or whatever it is. You just give them that little bit more language to build on it. In terms of activities to do, I think the most important thing is to keep it easy and manageable. So I don't think that it's realistic that parents have a time in their day that they schedule for language development and talking. It's about doing those things as part of everything else you're doing. Even with babies, when the focus is so much on feeding and sleep, it's just about putting language with those situations. So when you're starting to feed your baby solids, you can talk about the food, the texture, the colour, all sorts of different things. When you're changing a nappy, it's about playing peekaboo and putting some language alongside that, telling them about the clothes you're dressing them in. So it's building it into everyday activities and then also building it into play that your child enjoys. So if you have a child that loves trains, you add language to those situations. If they love watching the garbage truck, you can add language when you're going shopping, whatever it is, trying not to make it an extra thing, but just putting some words into that situation.
So, Helen, can I ask about that? One of the really common questions, the feedback we've got from parents is they want to know, you know, you've spoken about the fact that talking with your baby is a step towards their communication skills that they'll have for life. So let's say I have a newborn baby. No, I don't even want to imagine that. Let's say someone else has a newborn baby who they want to be a great communicator in life. How much do they have to talk to them as a baby?
Yes. What's the recipe, Helen?
Can they have quiet time, or is it the more you're doing, the better? You know, I think parents want to know, how do I make sure I'm ticking the box and doing it right, but also being able to get on with the other things I have to do and the rest of my life?
Absolutely. So the more talk, the better.
Yeah.
Yes. The more you can add language to those interactions, the better. And the other important thing is you're not just doing that for language development, even though I think that is so important and will be, those skills are required for their whole life. By having that talk and those interactions, you're also building their social emotional skills, their skills around having relationships and interactions with other people. You're building their brain architecture. You're showing them how the world works and how things are connected. So that's really important for a whole range of reasons. So we know that if kids are read one book a day even, that in terms of the language and vocabulary that they're exposed to, that adds up to them being exposed to over 3,000 words by the time they've started school. And if you're able to do more than one book a day, up to 5 books a day, that those children are starting school at the age of 5, having heard over 1 million words. And that's a really big difference for children when they start school, and it sets them up for success. Yes, you can absolutely have quiet time, and personality comes into this too. You have to enjoy this time, and so does your child. And we all know that there are some children who are very chatty and love to talk and talk and talk, and other children who are quieter and like to take time to sit back and watch the world and then add some language later. And as parents, we all bring different personality types and strengths to that as well.
This is a real hot button topic. We did a big episode on screen time. What are your thoughts on that in terms of speech development? Can it help or hinder?
Unfortunately, screen time does not help speech and language development for children. The research is quite clear in this area. And the reason that it doesn't help is because it's not interactive. It's not giving us those back and forth serve and return interactions. It's a really passive activity a lot of the time for children. So the research tells us again and again that it is not great for developing language skills because we're missing out on that time for interaction. What I would say, and the guidelines are clear, we know the guidelines are 0 hours under 2 and then only 1 hour after that. And if families are able to stick to that and reduce their screen time, that's great. What I would also say is that as a mother of 4 children, I cannot stick to those
Thank you,
guidelines.
Helen.
And I think families are really busy and life is really complicated. And I think everybody is doing their best. And I think we need to be aware of the evidence and information, but also try to balance that for our children. So I think for me, that's being aware of looking for little opportunities where you might be able to reduce the screen time a bit. because for all of us, it becomes a habit. And it becomes a habit because it works so well at keeping our children occupied and we can get other things done. And I totally understand that. But I think we have to think about how we balance that across a day. And while we know that every extra minute of screen time is not good for our children, I would like to flip that and think about, well, if I could reduce the screen time just a little bit, that's really great. So if I've been able to cut back the screen time that my children have had today, that's really good. And I'm going to try to do that again, because I think it doesn't help any of us to focus on the negative side and to feel bad about it. So it might be that we're in a habit of turning the TV on first thing in the morning, and we might be able to think, well, I could possibly set my child up with a game or activity and delay turning that on for a little while. Or I've got into a habit of giving my child the phone when we do the grocery shopping, because otherwise it is not manageable at all. But as they get older, you might think, well, actually, I could probably do a little bit of the shopping before I hand over that phone. And any little changes like that that we're able to make that reduce that screen time, I think we should feel really good about that we've been able to reduce it and manage it. And also thinking about the quality of the screen time that we expose our children to. So there's a big difference between FaceTiming a relative and having a chat versus watching something on YouTube that just goes on and ends up in a very unusual place that you weren't expecting. So there are things that you can do on screens where children can listen to somebody reading a book to them, or a show that's been made about a book that they really enjoy. And then if we can take that opportunity and have a chat about it afterwards, if we can watch the show with them and talk about it, then that is a really positive thing. If we can show children screen time where they're singing and dancing and they're up and about and moving and we're interacting with them, then that's better quality screen time.
So what you're saying is it's not complete restriction and that's not realistic. It's refining. It's a few tweaks here and there.
I think for me as a parent, yes. I think the research and the guidelines are clear that it doesn't benefit. I guess no app or TV show or anything like that can ever replace a quality, positive interaction with a parent. You are the most important thing in helping your child learn language, and a screen can't replace that. But I think screens are here to stay, and there are times when we all rely on them to get through the day and juggle all the different demands that we're trying to juggle as parents. And it's about making it the best quality it can be and thinking about how over time we might be able to reduce it and continuing to try, because some days it goes better than other days.
That's right. Helen, there's one final question that we ask every guest that we have on our podcast. You're an expert in your field, and this doesn't need to just apply to what you specialise in, but knowing all that you know, working with families and babies and toddlers throughout the years, what is the one thing you wish parents knew?
I wish parents knew how important they are in developing their children's skills for life, and the power of the simple serve and return interactions that they have for building their child's language skills and for building their brain, that those interactions are so positive that they can even buffer less positive things that are happening in a child's life. And every time that you're interacting or reading a book for the millionth time or singing a song over and over again, that is such important, valued work that is building your child's brain for life.
There's a Words Grow Minds ad
Isn't
right
it?
there, right there. Perfect. Helen Smith, it has been an absolute delight to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us today and for all of the amazing work that you're doing out there with children and young people and developing speech and oral language. We're very, very grateful to you.
Thank you.
All right, Kate, we covered a lot of ground there. What did you love?
I just think that speech pathologists might actually be the best people in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so gentle, but really just captured the importance of talk is we talk all the time. Sometimes we talk too much. But I think what she really captured is that this is important for language development. It's important for later communication skills, for emotional connection, that there is so much that we can achieve by doing something so simple.
Well, you're looping your child in.
Yeah.
Every episode we've recorded of this podcast is reminding us of how, and just like what Helen said, how important parents are to their child. You are their world.
Yeah.
And you're just, it seems so silly just to, you're out grocery shopping and to talk about things as you go, but you're including them and you're bringing them on that journey and teaching them things. I loved that a lot of her advice though, and I wrote this down because I love it, is keep it easy and manageable.
Yeah.
It's not these intricate word games or flashcards or anything like that. It is as simple as just think about how you can talk about this moment with your child, or, reading books going from 1 to 5 and the difference that means. I mean, 5 feels like a lot, but, kids' books are pretty quick, I suppose, and just working out how you can bring that in. And, yeah, I think just the simple tips on how you can involve that in everyday life.
She had great tips. Like even just the extension of, yes, that's a ball, that's a yellow ball, that's a big yellow ball, just the constant extension on really simple concepts. I thought they were great tips. I think she's amazing. And a big thank you to all the speechies out there.
Yeah, totally. And the resources that Helen shared that we will put in our show notes as well. Some really great tools there, especially for those parents who are on those long waiting lists, some real great places that you can dock in and just get some more information. That does bring us to the end of today's episode though.
So thanks once more to Helen Smith, and we will see you next time for more Words Grow Minds. Thanks for listening to the Words Grow Minds Parent Podcast. We love hearing from you, so please subscribe, review and comment on the podcast. And for plenty of ideas to support your child's development, go to wordsgrowminds.org.au and follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
Your words will grow their mind.